Hey everyone, Lohali here. Before we kick off this edition of the Manga Club with SimplyGee, I just want to apologize for the video technical issues that we ran into on my end. Her video screen was not actually working properly on my portion of the video, so instead of doing it where we flip back and forth between both of us, I'm going to put just a picture up of her and then my reactions on the side. So again, apologize. Enjoy this episode about Shojo, and let's dive right into it. Aloha Manga Club, it's your boy Lohali signing in with SimplyGee, and today we're going to be talking about Shojo, and I'm not quite sure how to spell it right, but she can spell it right and she can give us the rundown of everything to do with it. I'm pretty excited for this episode because this is something that her and I have talked about back and forth on Twitter a lot, and I've been corrected quite a few times by UG, because when I erroneously made the comment of Ranma one half being a shoujo. It is a shonen, and I was so wrong. Only a little embarrassed. But how are you doing today, G?
I'm very well. I hope everybody is doing well in this current time. I hope everyone's safe and healthy and happy. Myself, I'm all right. Very happy to be talking about a topic which I think I've become kind of the spokesperson for. And yeah, I'm looking forward to answering some of the questions and just having a general discussion about this pretty diverse demographic that people don't seem to know too much about. So yeah.
I mean, it is pretty. It's pretty extensive. I mean, the amount of shoujo in the world is, I mean, on par or greater than shonen, if I believe, because wasn't shoujo one of the very first official manga styles? I remember
shoujo and shonen were the very first. Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people know Tezuka and like obviously are aware of him popularizing manga and like creating it as to what we understand as manga. And he was just like a mangaka. He would make every demographic shoujo, shonen, seinen, before those were really, especially like the seinen josei stuff, those weren't really established yet. And shoujo has a pretty interesting history because a lot of the tropes, a lot of the background of where we see shoujo stories starting were from girls' novels. So in the earlier, like wartime and pre-war, and slightly post-war, you'd have a lot of these girls' novels which were focused on like friendships between girls and usually the relationship between mother and daughter or a relationship between sisters. And so shoujo manga evolved from those sorts of stories. It's also why later we see a lot of shoujo was the demographic to establish genres like Yuri and BL, because they kind of spawned from those like girls novels as well, a lot of those tropes. And it's quite interesting because I think the perception of shoujo now especially is that it's very romance focused. It's very just girl and boy falls in love type of stuff. But in the 50s and the 60s, and I've spoken about that, or actually I spoke about this with my co-host on our podcast Rewrite to Left, of how romantic relationships weren't appropriate for girls. So the earliest shoujo manga didn't have any of these falling in love like storylines whatsoever, because it wasn't deemed, appropriate for girls to be thinking about love. So yeah, it's an interesting way that it's evolved, because then after the 50s and 60s, then we do see this Year 24 group, is a very influential group of women who did primarily focus on shoujo manga, and they were what made shoujo manga really what it is now. A lot of the tropes, a lot of the styles and genres within there, a lot of sci-fi, a lot of historical fiction, that sort of stuff. And they really pushed the envelope for manga when shonen manga wasn't doing the same things. Shonen manga was a bit more one note and rote and not nearly as interesting to read in that period. And so and now I think it's just continued to evolve. And so there's a lot that people are aware of because it gets licensed primarily, but then there's other stuff that people have no idea about, and that's where we see a couple of those come out via licensing, but overwhelmingly it's more so like the high school romance stuff that we're seeing being licensed. Not always, but sometimes you get a good fantasy in as well, but generally it's the high school romance stuff that people I think know more about. Anyway.
So while you were talking, I did take a little bit of a chance to Google Year 24 group, and it's from 1970s, 1970 to 1973, or they're called Year 24 because it again, we talk about this in the podcast, but it was a marketing term put together by Keiko Takamiya and her editor, and they basically grouped a bunch of these very popular female mangaka at the time who were born in year 24, so Showa year 24, which is 1948, something like that. 1949. So not all of it's weird because not all of them are from year 24. Not all of them, a lot of the members kind of are very circumstantial as to like whether you include them or whether you don't. But some of the most famous that people would know because their stuff has been licensed in English are Moto Hagio, who did Heart of Thomas, the Poe Clan, Otherworld Barbara, etc. And then also Keiko Takamiya, who's done Tutera, Andromeda Stories. I think that's all that we have of hers in English. And one of the kind of honorary Year 24 members is Ryoko Ikeda, so Rose of Versailles, which is her big thing and probably one of the most influential and popular shoujo manga ever of all time. So there's a lot of different members, and again, like it just depends on who you want to count. The Japanese list is so extensive, and unfortunately we don't see a huge amount of their work in English outside of Hagio. So hopefully that changes. It has been changing couple times over this past year and a half of licensing, but it's kind of something that if you know about it, you know about it, but a lot of people don't know about it because they don't really care about that era of manga anyway, unless I feel people have this perception that like manga started and ended with Tezuka, and he wrote shoujo manga as well, as I said, but there was a lot of different creators coming out who have all kind of contributed to the many years, many decades of this art form. Yeah, and there's just a ton of things going on. Actually, I don't know if Tezuka gets a lot of credit for things, and he's definitely done a lot, but he gets a lot of credit. I actually didn't know that he did any shoujo work. So I guess my first question, now that we have this little history intro into it, how is it actually spelled? Because is it Shoujo or Shojo?
I think the standard is Shojo. But the problem is that like the translation of the way the O, like the sho of shoujo, it could be sometimes it's standardized like a single O, which is meant to be given that long O pronunciation, but sometimes people standardize it as the OU. You see with shonen as well. It's not, neither is correct, but I think that, or incorrect, but I think the standard is just the single O.
See, I didn't actually know that. this is you are literally a fount of knowledge when it comes to they okay. So just to break a little way of the Shoto discussion really quick, just so everyone knows,
Mm-hmm.
for a while there, whenever I'd make, I'd say something slightly erroneous in my videos, G would go out. You would type literal paragraphs, like giving a full breakdown on why something, like where I was wrong, and I'm genuinely appreciative of that because you have such a depth of knowledge, like it's unreal.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that.
Well, hopefully, I try not to be like. I don't want to be like, oh, you got this wrong. You how stupid of you. But like,
Trust
I
me,
think it's better to share. Like, I guess educate is maybe the right word
it's
when you can,
yeah,
because
and
that makes everyone happier.
it does, and that's the thing is if I'm uneducated, especially as a manga tube creator, like someone who's enthusiastic about it and having a voice in the community, if I'm giving away erroneous information, I'd rather you tell me where I'm wrong and be like,
Mm,
okay, Brian Lohali, this is what's actually happening. This is where you're at. This is where your misconception is, and this is why it's
mm-hmm.
wrong. And actually, again, like I've said, um, for a while there, I used to think that Ranma One Half was a shonen was a shojo manga, and I also thought
No,
Inuyasha was a little bit. It's definitely not.
no.
But would it be fair to say that now in modern times we're seeing almost more of a mix between shojo and shonen a little bit, like shonen's almost being a little bit more inspired by what shojo has done on their creative beats anyway?
I think that now, especially like it's hard because demographic terms can be so general, and people have this argument of like, why do we even have the demographics anymore? And they everyone should just enjoy what they read, and or like read what they enjoy, which is, I agree wholeheartedly. I do think that regardless of your gender or your age or your background, you can enjoy manga that's outside of your demographic. But I feel like if you're talking about shonen particularly, I think we have seen a trend of shonen appeal
I think we're
to
streaming now.
both girls and boys, because now they realize that shonen has always been read by girls and young women.
Hmm.
So now they're just more aware that they can appeal to that, which is why you see a lot more, I guess, handsome character designs. You see a lot more I don't know, like, quite how. Also, we have a huge dearth of female shonen creators, which I think people may notice sometimes when there's a difference in how they're written. Things like Black Butler and Pandora Hearts, and Full Metal Alchemist is kind of the quintessential. But Rumiko Takahashi, she's a mainstay with Inuyasha and Ranma One Half and those sorts of things. It's not that like women write things differently, but now like I take the example of Haikyuu, which is a Weekly Shonen Jump title. It's assumed that the creator, the mangaka, is male. We don't actually know, but the way that story is written, the way that the character, like the focus on the characters, is very much how it very much is to appeal to a wider audience. And I think you see it a lot with, like, I don't know, if you're not in fandom spaces, you don't notice it, but like fangirls will always take cute boys and want them to kiss, and that's sort of the, not necessarily within the manga itself, but if you can appeal to that demographic, you have a dedicated fan base for life. Naruto, One Piece, all of those have that demographic of fan, and that's why they were so big. It's not just the boys watching it, it's the girls as well who are just as in love with it. So I think now more and more series are trying to appeal to both, which is maybe why we see a little less of the fan servicey types of series, or at least the fan servicey types of series don't get as big as like a Naruto or a Bleach or a Haikyuu or whatever else. So
And that's
yeah.
actually a thing that Sydney and I have talked about a little bit is Oda does a lot of things correct in his storytelling. Oda's big weakness
Hmm.
is women. He is his he. If you have you seen how he describes how he like comes up with the design for women? It's literally two circles and an X. I'm like,
I've
dude,
I've been reading One Piece during the spring. I mean, I was reading it before, but I've been like trying to get through it. I'm at about chapter 500 and something
okay.
disgusting. Or no, I'm probably 600. I think I've just finished. I'm going to Fishman Island, so
So you've
it's
just done the time skip?
600.
Okay.
Yes. So, but just reading some of the like the SBS things, I'm like, ooh, that's maybe not how I talk to my my fan base of 12-year-olds. That's fine.
It's
Like I don't. Hmm.
Oda's a very different individual. Very, very different. In fact, I'm not
Mm.
even. It sounds weird to say that I think that he holds himself back from doing what he actually wants to create with One Piece.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you read some of his earlier one shots, they're a lot darker. Like, a
Mm-hmm.
lot darker than One Piece.
Mm.
It's. One of his one shots was about a dude in a Western who's being haunted by another guy that he shot in the head. And then it ends by him killing another guy. And the
Mm.
ghost just disappearing. I was like, Oda, what? But anyway, sorry, you know me, I get distracted. We've actually talked about demographics before on one of our previous episodes of the Manga Club. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's a great thing to see more character based studies in shonen. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because they're very, very interesting and they can be very well done. In fact, that almost seems like more of a seinen-esque kind of thing, in my opinion, where they focus more on the character instead of the fighting. But I am
Mm-hmm.
100% a shonen trash stan. I love my shonen action trash. Like it's my baby. But the amount of people who get into manga and read one or the other, it can often be polarizing. And I think there was a discussion that you and I had a while back where it was, it's a big thing. Oh, what's a good shoujo manga? Trying to make it sound like shoujo in and of itself was an inferior uh, type of manga. In fact, I think that was
Yeah.
a tweet that you sent me just because we were having a discussion on it, and it was just
Mm-hmm.
very interesting to hear that opinion because it's something that I'd never thought of before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, verbiage is something that I mean, we talk when you talk, so a lot of the time you're not necessarily thinking about the words you use because you're not inherently meaning something bad or negative. Like you're not trying to be mean or whatever or dismissive about something, but like the implication that like there's only a few good series or only a few good series for boys implies that it's somehow a lesser series or that female media isn't appropriate for boys to read and yeah, I mean there's a lot of complicated, especially when people are like, oh, what's a good shoujo, when they ask me or when they ask some of my other fellow female creators, what they're actually asking is what's a good romance manga, not what's a good shoujo manga. um because again there's that misconception that that's all that romance or that's all that shoujo is, or that all romance is shoujo manga, which is patently false. Like it's just totally incorrect.
And that's actually a question that we kind of had.
Mhm.
We did get some questions in, and Stories on the Shelves, one of their questions was, what are some misconceptions, common or uncommon, about shoujo manga? And for
Mhm.
me, one of them absolutely was the whole it's a romance style of writing. And,
Mhm.
like on an intellectual level, I understand that that's true, but on a baser instinct, when I hear shonen, my gut reaction is to think romance. So, what are some other
Mhm.
misconceptions that we can kind of address and try to break apart here and say, well, here's what you think, and this is why it's not the case?
Mhm. Well, one of them, again, like a lot of romance. A lot of people assume it's a lot of the high school romance, or they're always set in high school, which is not true. Or there's only one. genre, which is that like first love, falling in love type of story. Another one is that the main character is always female, which is not true. I think the biggest example of that is my love story, where the main character is a guy, and that one gets like quoted or pushed around all the time. It's like, that's a really good shoujo manga for guys because it's the main character is a guy. And it's kind of sad to see people push that one, because the only difference between that story and like the fluffiest, most tropiest like fall in love story is that the main character is a guy. Right? It's got very much like the same setup as Kimi ni Toroke or Lovely Complex or whatever. Like it's got all of the quintessential, like if you think of the most saccharine fluffy fall in love story you can think of, the only difference between my love story, which is like, oh yes, this is really good and guys will love it, and something that people are like, oh no, like I'm not that into it if you're a guy, is that the main character is male. And like, oh, it's kind of sad to see that, especially. And then of course, again, that it's only girls can enjoy it, which I think, again, like Sailor Moon is one of the most nostalgic franchises ever, and that's, you know, that's girls and guys watched that when they were little. People didn't have the hang-ups back then, so you know.
It's because part of it, I think, is because anime just wasn't as widely, wasn't as popular in America. So whenever anyone would read it, they're like, oh, it's what we got, it's what we can get. But Sailor Moon has touched a lot of lives, and I think, isn't she married to the creator of Hunter x Hunter?
Yes, okay. Yoshiro Togashi, and then Naoto Takeuchi is her name. But I think, I mean, it's not just Sailor Moon. Fruits Basket was hugely popular amongst guys and girls, especially when the first anime was coming out. Ouran High School Host Club as well was very popular, the anime at least. And those are both, shoujo, like drama, comedies, rom-coms sorts of series. It's just that a lot of those, and Cardcaptor Sakura as well is another very nostalgic series. Clamp, kind of in general, is a hugely popular group. It's just so much that there wasn't, like, when we talk about television syndication, you do get most things like Naruto, Bleach, Inuyasha, Pokemon, these very fun action-oriented stuff, which is what this TV stations wanted, at least for like Toonami and stuff. So that's what people remember. But again, like, girls were watching that as well. It's not like girls weren't watching Dragon Ball Z. That's why Dragon Ball is so big. It's not just the guys watching it.
If it's only one, one group watching, it won't be as big. You have to have a solid fan base in both. Mm-hmm. The amount of people that I bumped into who've watched Naruto, it's honestly a pretty even split as to like, mm-hmm. guys and girls both. Everybody watches Naruto. Everybody watched Bleach, partially because Kubo created some very beautiful people. Like, everyone was beautiful. I'm not sure how he did it, but that man, I think actually, when I was doing my research for one of my videos, he originally was going to do like design work.
Mm-hmm.
He's very catchy with designs. But so here's something that I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, when it comes to Sailor Moon, why is that, other than the fact that it's obviously a shoujo, why is that a shoujo and not a shonen? To me, it feels very, shonen-esque. There's, battles. There's a ton of that stuff going on. And why did they decide to define it in that way when they very easily could have tried to sell it as a shonen? Because
the magazine that it was serialized in was sold for young girls. That's basically it. The fact, like, because obviously we know, I mean, again, not to bring Shonen Jump into this again, but like that's what people think of as like the quintessential magazine. Every manga is in a magazine like that, and they have a demographic, not necessarily for to say like, oh, stories can only be this certain type of thing. It does give kind of an outline of like, okay, this is your core audience. You want to try to appeal to them, but it's more so for like advertisers, for like, okay, do we want to be advertising, you know, this brand of shoes or makeup or, you know, toys, female like girl toys, or do we want to be advertising Transformers or, you know, yo-yo, like that sort of thing. So it's not so much that like one is inherently like, oh, if you're a shoujo manga, or you can't have action, you can't have. And I think of course like when shoujo also does have a focus on the there is usually more of a focus on the romantic side compared to shonen, because that's again like girls like their emotional, you know, characters doing things together, and that's maybe the point of difference, because Usagi and Mamoru, or Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask, are iconic, and a lot of the manga is about their relationship, but it's not about them like necessarily falling in love. They're kicking butt together, and then, you know, finding out that they're destined, and then they see their future selves, and then their daughter comes from the future, and you're like, oh my god, what's going on? But yeah, like if you compare, I think the percentage of like the romance stuff with or at least the stuff focused on these characters being together romantically versus something like Naruto, where it's like kind of sometimes there and then stuck on the end to be like, yes, where everyone's happy and married and now they have children and now we have a spin-off, is very different. Like it's night and day. So
literally everyone got married. Literally everybody. I'm actually more upset because Kakashi didn't have a son and name him Obito. That would have been baller. I would have actually watched like a series following around Kakashi's son. I don't care about Naruto's kid. Naruto's story's over. Give me Kakashi. I want a full Kakashi background. All right. Oh, you know me, always distracted. But so you think it's you know, the fact that they can push, you know, 60% of the audience leans one way, whereas 40% of the audience leans the other way. It's
not even that necessarily, because I mean, Inuyasha has a large part of it being the romance between Inuyasha and Kagome, but like, or Kagome, I haven't read Inuyasha, so apologies, but you know, it just depends on the creator, and it depends on, you know, what's expected of the thing. I mean, Ranma is a slapstick comedy like action, but the Akane and Ranma are, you know, the whole setup is that they're engaged. Like
Ranma is baller. Just if anyone watching this right now, if you need to pause this and go read all, I think 30 plus volumes, 40 plus volumes,
yeah. 38 volumes, 32, 36, something like that.
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. Go read them. It's hilarious, and it's a feel good. It's a feel good manga. But it is classified as like adventure, martial arts, and romantic comedy, and I love me some romantic comedies. Like those are some of my favorite horrible like B movies are rom-coms. Like any Dane Cook rom-com, I'm there. Hands down.
But yeah. It's interesting, like because for me, I have a perception of what shoujo is, and you have a perception of what shoujo is, and the misconceptions, I think you're more familiar with the misconceptions because I think they are something that you've believed. You know, you've had those misconceptions, so it's always good to have like your perspective on the whole thing, because then I can go, yes, that's true, or no, that's completely inaccurate.
And see, to me, it's just every single time that I've heard about, you know, shoujo, josei, I think, oh, romance. Okay, yeah, that seems like it'd be a shoujo. Or, oh, adult romance. That seems like it'd be a josei. But it'd be, that's just so wrong. That's the biggest misconception that I think anybody has, and unfortunately, it's so ingrained in a lot of the discussion right now. It's going to be,
Hmm.
I feel it's changing more towards that being less of a thing, but it's still ingrained deep in the mind that I think the younger generations are going to be fine. It's people like our age who are going to have to struggle to get over that thought. Um, at least
Well,
I
I
hope
mean,
so.
by people of your age, I think it's guys of our age, not so much the girls.
Okay,
Uh,
people who
not.
look like this have this. They don't necessarily have this much hair, but yeah, guys, definitely guys, 100% think of it. Like I think the misconception needs to be broken among guys because we're, we hear romance and our brain just turns off. It's the way that we were it's the media that we were raised on. It's like, oh, romance, pff, that's lame. And then you go
And
watch a good romance and you cry.
but it's interesting because honestly, some of my favorite romance stuff, romantic comedies and romantic dramas that are coming out right now are shonen or seinen. Like some of my favorite romantic manga are from those demographics versus shoujo, especially. And I love a good shoujo romance, but like a lot of my favorite stuff are from like Karumori and who does like Emma and The Bride Story, and stuff like Horimiya or Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun, which are both shonen. So it's like there's yeah.
A Bride Story is actually really beautiful. Like that artwork is stunning.
Mm-hmm.
Just the detail in the clothing.
The
Sorry.
story's pretty great too, but whatever.
So I've never actually read it. I looked it up because we mentioned it. It's been mentioned to me a few times, but every single time I
Mm-hmm.
have to relook it, just remember what we were taught to remember what's been mentioned about it. And I just always am blown away by the artwork.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a gorgeous manga. Emma is beautiful as well. Completely different setting, but beautiful.
It's called Emma.
Emma or Emma manga or Emma a Victorian romance is what the anime is called,
Hmm.
and that one's a Victorian English romance between a young master, young lord and a maid, and so it's the a marriage between classes, and ooh, it's so good.
This is really. Hmm. Out of
And that
those
one's
two,
finished.
which one would you recommend? Would you recommend Emma or
I,
would you recommend A Bride Story?
they're both wonderful. It's just it depends on what you're wanting. Emma's finished for one, so that's maybe a little bit easier to recommend. And if you want, this clash between societal expectations and the whole class dynamic from the Victorian period, and I mean both of them have wonderful female protagonists. Mori is great at whatever she does, but if you don't like, I think Emma is very much more focused on the characters and their romance, whereas A Bride Story is about multiple different couples, multiple different brides, and there's a lot more world building because of that. It goes much more into the nitty gritty of like Silk Road era, Middle East, like Iran, Persia, that sort of thing. So I mean, I adore a majority of the couples in that manga, and there's a lot more diversity within it because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just Amir and Karluk's story. We've got lots and lots and lots of characters here, and there's also the age gap, I think, which people might like balk at with the Bride Story, but it's done very, very well, which is big for me to say because I usually don't like age gaps. So yeah, they're both good. Like I can't really recommend one over the other. It just depends on what you're looking for.
I think I might actually start off with if I decide to go down that road, I might do Emma since it's finished.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but My Love Story,
and they're beautiful. They're beautiful.
Calling my name.
My Love Story.
I don't know why it's calling my name. It like that for some reason the cover that I'm seeing of it reminds me of Angel Densetsu. Just I don't know why. Just has that same vibe. It's weird.
My Love Story or A Bride Story?
My Love Story. Sorry.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm trying to just because I My Love Story is very sweet. I love it.
Hmm.
It's good. I feel like the mangaka's other work is funnier. um, and I like that one a little bit more.
Which one was the
Just
other
I don't
one?
know. That one is I actually talk about it for a recommendation, but it's called High School Debut. I just recently read it myself. It was a recommendation to me from Ray from Whimsical Pictures, and I love that series a lot. It reminds me of Lovely Complex, which was one of my first shoujo that I ever read, and was just really funny and wonderful. And I like it when a couple acts like friends and they seem to have people like they seem to have a lot in common, which is not always the case in shoujo romance. So yeah, I like the main character of that series a lot. Haruna, she's really great.
So you'd say High School Debut and Emma would be the two to read right now. If I was to leaving this, I should read those two to get my intro. Other than I do have the Rose King.
I mean,
Well,
it did again. Like, I can't say that those are what you like. I mean, you should definitely try them. I think you should definitely read them. But it's like, what are you wanting from your series? If you want an action-oriented shoujo, Yona of the Dawn is phenomenal and probably one of the best series coming out right now. Rose King, as you mentioned, is great. If you want something that's very funny, like hilariously funny, Skip Beat is wonderful. Like there's a lot. There's so many. So, you know, I think there's more than people realize. And like I'm not completely versed on what's coming out either because I don't buy everything. I don't read everything. So these are just my like limited view on titles that are available from
I
the
don't
stuff
think it's
that
a
I've read.
limited view. Definitely, I have the most limited view. I read like 5 things, and I'm like, all right, this is where I'm at for right now. Like I put a pause on
Mm,
watching on reading Golden Kamuy recently. I enjoy
mm,
it, but I was like, I'm gonna pause on this for right now. I've got way too much going on with 4 series, which is a
mm.
sense. I used to follow like 7 or 8 series at a time, not including like ones that I'd be reading just to bulk read. But so going back to questions from the peanut gallery, because I'm trying to make sure that we haven't necessarily answered them.
Mm.
Um, what is a, and this is from Zach from Uchi Shelf, what is a shoujo
Mm.
or josei you would recommend to someone who sees them as girly or romance? And
Um, yeah.
I think we've talked a little bit about that, and in fact, just right now with like Yona of the Dawn, Requiem of the Rose King. But is there anything else that you'd kind of put on the radar?
I mean, if those are definitely ones to go for if you're looking for action. If you want a really um wonderful, I guess, political thriller, historical series, Oku by Fumi Yoshinaga is phenomenal. I adore that
Oku?
series. Oku. It's OOKU. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I'm a big Yoshinaga fangirl, so I'm biased, but it's wonderful. And then Josei, I mean, my go-to is Descending Stories. That's like a hugely intimate character study. And the main character is male, and it's very much about like the Showa period and traditional arts and the relationship between artist and art form and the change that was happening with traditional arts and media and entertainment throughout the Showa period, which again was like the 1920s up until the late 1980s. So that's
Mhm.
like a huge period of time. Just how we entertain ourselves completely changed over then. So that is it's so good. It's so good. But even things like I mean, Phantom Tales of the Night is I love it because I'm a big yokai fan. It's very creepy. It's got kind of a unnerving an inhuman element to it, which all good yokai stories should have. Number 6 is is a genre sci-fi series, which dystopic feature type of stuff. Helter Skelter. And the thing is, Phantom Tales of the Night, Descending Stories, and Number 6 all have main male characters, are focused on male characters. Helter Skelter is like that one has a female lead, but that one's in it's a horror. It is a modern horror. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. And then on like the other foot, we have stuff like With the Light, Raising an Autistic Child, which is about like that's almost an educational manga about autism and autism awareness within Japan and that sort of thing. So like there's I mean, like any genre, there's a huge dearth of it. It's not all office lady romance or high school romance. So
See, now I have like 20 tabs open right now, trying to remember all these. Because that's what I love doing. And then conversely, the second part of this question, because it's a tricky two-parter. What is a shonen or seinen that you'd recommend to someone who misconceives these as purely actiony or constant fighting?
Well, I mean, shonen. I've already mentioned Nosaki-kun, Monthly Girls Nosaki-kun, or Horimiya are both rom-coms. They're hilarious. I adore them. A Silent Voice, you know, that's very popular. And
I read A Silent Voice, like, I think right when it came out. Somehow I got my eyeballs on that. Definitely legally, 100% legally. And I read that, and that tore me up.
Yeah, and I mean that's a romance or a relationship focused shonen. Silver Spoon, again, comedy, like relationship focused comedy, and Blue Flag, which just ended, and the first print in English is coming out this month, and I adored that. It's probably the ending is hit or miss for some people. I didn't. I really liked it, and it's so good. And if you like, it has that one's a coming of age drama with a romance element to it, kind of a love triangle, love square element, which is again something I'm not super into in manga, and it's just done so perfectly. It's done so well, and everyone should read it. So yeah, that one shonen. There's a lot of stuff, and that comes out that isn't, you know, action oriented. And seinen is I kind of laughed when I saw this because I would say that majority of seinen we get isn't action focused or even dark necessarily. Anything again by Kawamori, anything by Natsume Ono, stuff like House of Five Leaves or Aka 13, neither of which have like any, they're very, because Iyashikei, which is a genre in itself, is almost completely seinen stuff, and that's healing stuff. That's stuff like Aria. That's stuff like Mushishi. That's stuff like any of Jiro Taniguchi's work, Walking Man, stuff like that. And stuff like a lot of the cooking manga, stuff like What Did You Eat Yesterday, Sweetness and Lightning. Those are all seinen. Yotsuba, Barakuman, like young kid antic stuff as well. So
I mean,
I read almost entirely, like most of my ongoing titles that I read are seinen. And almost none of them have action. So
it's
like that's just
very true. Like one that I always recommend that people try to read is Space Brothers. I think it's just a lot of fun to read, and it's very emotional. Wow, that turned really bright really quick. Sorry, my screen just went super bright. But yeah, Space Brothers is 100% not actiony. Realistically, if you think about it, I personally don't consider like Monster or Pluto to be action. I mean, they have action in them, but they're that psychological, you know, introspective. They try to make you question who you are, and I think that's the sign of a good seinen. And I think it really expands itself. But that's something completely off bat. Um, and I actually have read two other things recently. Uh, I'm not sure if I can count one of them as a shojo, uh, but I'm gonna try. Black Chocolate, I think.
I
That was the name of it.
don't
It
know.
was Yeah, it was Black Chocolate. I think it was a one shot. I think I cheated a little bit. I'm totally counting it as a one shot. Be wrong. There we go. Back to color. Um, it was weird. I don't know. I don't know. I
I
might have
don't
gotten
know
the
if
name
I know
wrong.
Black Chocolate.
Yeah, might have gotten the name wrong. Probably typed it in wrong. I remember reading it was a romance, 100% shoujo. One thing that I didn't, when I was doing research on like my list to make all the list of manga that I read, I think I found this wrong, and hopefully you can correct me. Is Code Geass, Lelouch the Rebellion shoujo, or is it shonen? Because I found it and it said shoujo.
I mean, again, that isn't really much to do with anything aside from the magazine that it was published in. And of course, Code Geass kind of as a concept, the fact that the character designs were done by Clamp, they know they know the type of fan they want, which is the kind of fangirl who wants to see Lelouch and Suzaku kissing. And so you're going to put it in a magazine that has those sorts of readers.
See,
So
I'm just
like the,
I'm having flashback to the Sanji Zoro fan art stuff that I've accidentally come across. It's
I mean,
strange.
fat like I Fujoshi are a large, diverse, very powerful bunch, and I have the utmost respect for them because they are the most dedicated fans. The most dedicated fans. Like take the fanaticism of like the K-pop or boy band group and then apply it to anime, and that's what they are. Like it's I don't there's I love it. I think that it's wonderful that I maybe not when it's real people being affected, but there's no harm in it, and I don't think it will ever, like, if you're upset that girls like to imagine that Naruto and Sasuke are kissing, then that's your issue. Like, it doesn't actually affect the story whatsoever.
See, now
So
Naruto and Sasuke make sense to me. That makes sense. It's just Zoro and
they're
Sanji.
rivals. They have prickly personalities and they don't get along. That is the biggest trope. Rivalries. Like, I don't.
It's just always like I said, Naruto and Sasuke. I'm like, yeah, that actually makes perfect sense. 100%, 100%.
Hey, the heart wants what the heart wants. It doesn't. Nothing ever has to make sense.
It's true. I don't make a lot of sense sometimes. No, I finally found one character in One Piece who knows how to give directions to Zoro so he doesn't get lost, and it's very interesting. You'll come across it in a future arc, by the way. Hopefully, if
I'm sure I will.
It's
no, I'm getting through it. Getting through it.
That's what Sydney says. She's like, "Oh, I'm just getting through it. It'll be fine. We'll be good." So, what are some series that you're eager to check out, if any, right now?
I'm really excited for, and I think the first volume of one of them has come out already, or is coming out. I don't know. Viz has two upcoming titles for their shoujo beat line. The first one is Prince Freya, which looks wonderful. That's about a young woman who I think has been either raised to be a prince or has taken on, I think, or she looks identical to the. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. That one was a recommendation to me again from Ray from Whimsical Pictures. She's read it in Japanese or is reading it in Japanese, and she loved it. I'm also really, really looking forward to Not Your Idol, which I don't really know a huge amount about, but everything that I've heard about it from the translator, from people who have read it, really, really liked it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to those two. I haven't gotten around to reading Night on the Ice. I haven't gotten around to Something's Wrong with Us. I haven't gotten around to a lot of the Kodansha stuff, so I can't really give my opinion on those, but I am interested in looking at them at least. So yeah.
I still have zero. Now I have a whole list that you're gonna make me go through and read, so this way
Mhm.
next time that we have a conversation about them, I will be more informed. I'm just trying to make up my mind which what I want to do first. Might do high school debut. I like the artwork. The artwork's grabbing me for high school debut for
Mhm.
sure.
It's
For sure.
funny. I think, and I really like that one because it not only, because I, again, maybe this is a misconception, but a lot of high school shoujo, or a lot of shoujo about high school romance, is about them falling in love, and like the, oh, will I tell him? Oh, like, oh, there's a misunderstanding. High school debut has its couple get together pretty quickly, and then it means that we can focus on these characters being in a relationship for majority of it, which is really refreshing, and I think a really great thing to see. I think it's because it's not so much like, for me, I find that romance series gets even can be even better once you have an established couple, once you see, because I mean, obviously relationships don't end at the confession. In fact, they start at the confession, but usually sometimes that's where the manga finishes, and so you don't get the payoff necessarily of like, oh, these characters are together. And so yeah, high school debut does have that. And my love story has that as well. The both of those have their characters get together pretty quickly, and then a lot of it is about their relationship whilst in a relationship. And so yeah.
All right. Good to, like I said, I have high school debut and Emma both just permanently on tabs right now so I can find them and read them later because I trust you wholeheartedly. Wholeheartedly. So, is there anything else that we need to know? Like I said, this is a quick starter course on shojo. You have an entire podcast episode, another one that will be linked in the comments down below that people definitely need to go watch if they want more information. Um, but what are some other quick and interesting tidbits that we might want to know? Like,
uh,
I
I
don't know.
mean, the sci-fi is the thing is, I think that shoujo has a perception of being this high school romance in the West because that's what gets licensed. Fantasy shoujo is now starting to become popular again, since its first wave of popularity in the 90s and early 2000s. But like sci-fi has always been a mainstay. Horror is quite prominent within shoujo. There's a lot out there, and some of it gets released, although not necessarily as a shoujo in the West. Things like Rose King, things like Ooku. So there's a very high chance that people have read a shoujo but just aren't aware of it.
Or you think that you've read one and you definitely haven't. Again, my bad.
Yeah.
So sorry.
And if you're ever not sure, I think a great way to check is to Google the title and then Baka updates with that, and they have all of the genre tags and the demographic tags and what magazine it's in. Because if you like something, you can look at other series from that magazine, and they'll usually have the same sort of atmosphere, tone, tropes, that sort of thing. So yeah.
I think that's what people should focus on more instead of demographic. They should focus on, oh, what are stories similar to it? Because
Mhm.
let's be completely honest here. Like, and this is just an example. I'm not gonna recommend. I probably wouldn't recommend. Man, I'm having to go through the list, and this is really hard. This is a lot harder than I thought it was gonna be. I had one in my head. Like I wouldn't recommend Fairy Tale if you loved Monster. Like,
Mm.
if you liked Fairy Tale, I'm gonna recommend you maybe Naruto, Rave, One Piece, stuff of that nature. Like focus on things that have very similar aspects instead of being like, oh well, it's a shonen, so I'm gonna recommend to you more shonen or more seinen. Just things like that. I think is a way that we can
Yeah,
help change
I
the
think
narrative for guys for sure.
I think that's also because I've made this comparison before of like a lot of times people will try a shoujo and they don't like it, and they're like, well, shoujo's not for me, right? Like, oh, I tried, I don't know, Say I Love You. I tried Say I Love You. I didn't like it, and I'm like, obviously shoujo isn't for me. I'm just gonna stick with Bleach. Um, but girls, if girls don't have this thing where it's like, well, or people in general, like if you dislike a shonen, like me and yourself as well, I hate Bakuman, but I wouldn't thus be like, well, shonen's not for me. Guess I'm not gonna read My Hero Academia. Guess I'm not gonna read Silver Spoon. Like, there's so many. Shonen isn't given this overwhelming, like, oh, they're all the same. Like, obviously Nisekoi isn't the same as Haikyuu isn't the same as
Death
Silver
Note.
Spoon. As Death Note. Like, all of those are not the same. You're not going to be like, oh, I didn't like Yu-Gi-Oh! And people are, well, shonen's not for you. It's like, well, maybe don't focus on like card-based or like tactician-based or whatever, battle manga, those sorts of manga. You will enjoy this one or this one instead. So.
See, all that I'm picturing now is like if I had read Death Note and been like, nope, shonen's not for me. Done here. That would have been the most ridiculous thing ever. Like,
yeah.
Oh man, that just makes me hurt. That makes my soul hurt on the inside. Ooh, oh boy. I think we are nearing the end of our hour, which is saddening, but still good because it means that I have a lot more to learn. But before we go, I always like to ask a question right at the very end to try to get to know everyone better. And I always do it based off of something sitting in my near vicinity. Right now I have a chocolate rabbit sitting directly in front of me from Easter. What kind of chocolate are you?
Probably dark, as in like dark, dark, dark. Probably like 95, 98% with almonds. That's my favorite kind.
90,
so that's probably what I like.
95? I have a 75% bar sitting in. I have a lot of candy around me. It's a very weird thing. 90% is a dark, dark chocolate. Wow.
Yeah, I don't eat it all. Generally I eat like 90, 95, and then I have also had 99, which is good, but you have to take it in small doses. And I don't really like a lot of sweets. I just can't eat them. It gives me a headache. So yeah, I just no sugar in my coffee, no sugar in my chocolate.
I drink unsweetened tea. That's my thing. Is unsweetened tea with maybe some spices, no sugar. I hate sugar tea. It's too cloyingly sweet. If I was gonna be a piece of candy, 100% cliche, but I'm gonna be a dark chocolate caramel because I do, and I know it's technically caramel. I can't say caramel. My mouth, like, I used to have a speech impediment when I was a child. Like, I used to say my rth and my eth with like this. I couldn't say rth and eth, so I say caramel and Caribbean instead of Caribbean. It's just strange. I know that technically. Did you know that caramel and caramel were two different things? Because I didn't for the longest time.
Yeah, it's a preparation thing, and also I think there's also just an accent thing as well. There's not. You can just pretend you're from somewhere else. You're like, oh no, I grew up in England. That's why I pronounce it this way. That's what I do because I never remember what's right or correct here because I don't.
I'm from the Midwest. We literally have no accents, so unfortunately, it's just the random slang that you use, like Missouri, Grassland.
You say you have no accent. You have an accent. You just aren't aware of it. Like, I have an accent. I can't hear it. But when I hear myself back, I'm like, oh God, what is that mess? And I think for me, like I have definitely Australianisms that I say. Again, like slang, but a lot of my pronunciation is American, so that's a bit of a mess.
I literally have. I can't even do like a bad fake Australian accent. Like
Mm.
it's yeah. Normally I can do
My
like
sister's really good at a bogan one, but I can't really do one very well.
what's
So
bogan?
bogan's like our version of a redneck, I guess,
Oh, okay.
or like trailer trash. I don't know.
I can do some pretty decent redneck. See, all you gotta do is you gotta put
I
that little dip
mean,
in your lip right there, and you just keep talking like that. Get a big old dip
no,
right there.
bogans are like 100% swearing, and then sometimes other stuff.
That
So
sounds like
you
my
know.
kind of language. Cuss words and non-words. Yeah, I'm down. I'm 100% down. But let everyone know where they can find you. Like I said, the link to the Year 24 podcast. The what was the name? What's the name of your podcast again? I'm
It's called Read Right to Left. I co-host it with the wonderful Ray from Whimsical Pictures, who I've mentioned multiple times in this in this video. And that one is Year 24 is focused on the 70s shoujo manga movement. We have also done a romance manga video, which we actually had Aisha from Mama Loves Manga, as well as Shay from Shay Geeks Out, where we talk about romance just in general, over all of the different demographics. That one's a two-parter, so lots of content there.
episode
You
eight
can
and
also
eight and a
find
half.
me. You can find me on SimplyGee, that's my channel, and well as Twitter, where I'm at collecting G, all one word, all spelt GEE. So yeah.
And everything that G's just mentioned will be linked down in the description of this video, so definitely click it there. You all know where to find me, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be watching this video, probably. So good on you. G, thank you so much for being on, giving recommendations, giving us a little bit of a history lesson, breaking down misconceptions. We talked about it all in an hour, and I'm really pumped. So thank you so much for being on this episode. And for everyone new and old, welcome and welcome back. It's your boy Lohuli, and I will see you next video.
Bye, everyone.